Hi, everybody. Gene here. Welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast, where every single week we answer the most common and uncommon questions about tapping and EFT so you can get the most out of your tapping practice, eliminate self-sabotage, and take the action that you want. As a reminder, every Monday in the podcast feed, we have been re-editing and repurposing and cleaning up a bunch of old bonus episodes and turned them into full-blown episodes of their own. This week, in episode 387, we talk about 3 things that you can do at the beginning of a tapping session to set yourself up for success so that you actually get the most out of that tapping session, because oftentimes the way we get in our own way is the disposition we have about the work that we are doing, which dovetails perfectly into today's topic about the biggest mistake people make when they're tapping and why they don't get enough out of their tapping. So enjoy the show. This is Gene Monterostelli, and welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast, recorded live to tape from Williamsburg in Brooklyn. This is episode 388, originally aired September 18th, 2019. Hi everyone, I hope this finds you well wherever you are and whatever time of day you're getting a chance to listen to this. Thanks for spending a little time with me. As I said at the top of the show, today we're going to be talking about the biggest mistake people make when they are tapping. And this is such a big mistake that it oftentimes really gets in the way of being able to have success with tapping at all. And if you're doing something in a way that is not producing fruit, it makes sense that you're going to stop tapping. So this impacts you doing this wrong in 2 ways. One is you don't get the most out of your tapping, and 2, demotivates you from continuing the tapping process. But before we jump into that, just a quick reminder, the Tapping Q&A podcast exists because of the support by listeners just like you. Every single month, those people who are supporting the show, in addition to getting the warm, fuzzy feeling of knowing that they're helping this free content to exist in the world, they also get access to amazing free bonus stuff. They get custom tapping scripts. Some of them even get one-on-one time with me, discounts on products. If you too would like to support the Tapping Q&A podcast, all you need to do is go to tappingqa.com/support or click on the link in the show notes. By doing this, not only are you supporting the podcast, but every single month we take 10% of the support and we loan it out on Kiva. Kiva is a microloan site that supports small business owners all over the world. And it's really fun. Every couple of weeks, I get notes from the lending agencies around the world that work directly with Kiva, telling us about the progress that these small business owners are making. And the really cool thing is once the money is paid back, I just immediately loan it out again. So my history with Kiva, for every $1 that has been put into my account for loans, it's actually been loaned out 4 times. So not only are you supporting something like the podcast, you are supporting small business owners all over the world over and over again. To all the supporters, once again, thank you very much. For most people, when they learn tapping and they learn the basics of tapping, one of the things that is hit home over and over again is that you need to be specific. And the more specific you are, the better the tapping is going to be. And lots of the tools and techniques that we learn, things like the movie technique, are just ways that are helping us to tune into what is going on. And I don't disagree with that as a piece of information. The more specific we are, the more successful we're going to be. Oftentimes, people mistake what the word specific means. That when people learn the basics of tapping and they have some examples that they're tapping on, they're examples where the root cause or the initial sensitizing event is something that is known. And so coming up with details is something that is easy to do. But that's not always the case. And there's a difference between being specific and being as specific as we can. And the reality is when we're tapping, the goal is to be specific as we can. And sometimes that's not very specific at all. So just to make it easier for when you tap, because again, it's easy for people to beat themselves up thinking, well, I don't have this memory from the past that I can go after, therefore it's not going to work. We start with whatever we know, and we give as much specifics as we can, even if that specific is, boy, this sucks. And that's the only thing we know, we can tap on that. Second, it's important to recognize the fact sometimes there's not an initial sensitizing event. And when I use that phrase, initial sensitizing event, what I mean is there is a specific memory in the past that puts us down a particular road. It's the first time initial sensitizing event, something that we feel with our senses that happen as an event. The example I always use, and this didn't happen to me, but it's easy to understand, is I could be camping as a child and my brother throws a rubber snake into my sleeping bag or into my tent, therefore I'm afraid of snakes. That is an initial sensitizing event, which makes tapping much easier because we know where it is. But some things don't have initial sensitizing events, so we will not be able to enter in because we can't think of the specific moment it starts. So that's to give you permission to set aside the necessity for having super detail in the beginning. The second thing that happens when we're tapping in this particular way is that when we think of specific, we think of the deep, darkest, specific root cause. And I have found oftentimes when we begin tapping on an issue, even if we have an inkling of what that initial sensitizing event is, we can't actually see it clearly because we're feeling a bunch of emotions in this moment about what is going on. And so the mistake people make, and the thing that I would encourage you to do, is to start with the specifics of the leading edge of the experience. So instead of trying to start at the root cause, we're starting at the farthest point away from it, which is what we're experiencing right now. And for me, that leading edge is the emotion I feel about the situation. So if you could kind of imagine in a drawing, there is at the center, there is the initial sensitizing event or the root cause, which could be a limiting belief that was given to us from someone else, or it could be a specific instance in our past or some combination of those. The next layer out from that is the emotion we feel as we are experiencing that particular problem. You know, if the initial sensitizing event is, I had a rubber snake thrown in my sleeping bag, so then the emotion it creates is a fear of snakes. But I think there is one more layer out, and this is the place that we always need to start when tapping. This is the place that I think is most effective for us when we're tapping. And that is, what is the emotion I have about the experience I'm having? So in this case, with a fear of snakes, I could have the emotion that I feel really embarrassed that I'm afraid of snakes. And I'm really embarrassed by the fact when someone says the word snake or shows me a picture of a snake, even though one is nowhere near me, I still freak out and I get really emotional. So we have root cause in the middle. We have the emotions we experience as we encounter the root cause. And then the third layer out, or that third part out, is the emotion about the experience. And so whenever I am tapping, that is the place that I like to start first. What is the emotion I feel because I'm experiencing this? The common emotions are, like I mentioned before, shame that we're feeling it. There could be disappointment. There could be a feeling of weakness. There could be a feeling of frustration that this thing is happening and getting in our way. But after you describe what is going on, ask yourself the question, how do I feel because this is happening? And then tap on that particular emotion. So in the example I gave of the snake is, I am really embarrassed that I am afraid of snakes. I'm embarrassed that even when I see a picture of a snake and I know that I am perfectly safe, I still freak out and get really, really afraid. And I give myself permission to know that my subconscious mind is just trying to keep me safe. It recognizes snakes are dangerous and it's just overfunctioning when it sees a picture. So even though I don't enjoy the experience, I know my system is trying to take care of me in a way that isn't super helpful. So you can see it's just really straightforward tapping about the emotion about the experience. And when I do this, a couple of things happen. The first is I soften towards the fact that I'm experiencing this. I start to be easier with myself. I start to understand why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling. And because of that, the issue has just gotten smaller. So again, if we imagine our drawing of root cause in the middle, emotions caused by the root cause on the outside of that, and then the next layer out is the emotion we feel, we've now peeled that big exterior layer off of it, and the issue gets smaller. So oftentimes tapping about the emotion about the issue immediately makes us feel better. The second thing is, now that that layer is clear, oftentimes we can see the root cause much more clearly. And since we can see the root cause much more clearly, we're able to tap in a more specific way. And like I said at the beginning, the place we're trying to get is to tap on the most specifics we have access to. And by getting rid of the outer layer of the emotion that we feel about the experience, it gives us clarity for what is in the middle. One of the ways I like to think about it is the issue is a tree that is in my backyard, and it's a ways away from my house. So it's in the back end of my backyard. And in the morning, like on a cool fall morning, I wake up, there's a bunch of mist in the backyard. And because there's a bunch of mist in the backyard, I can vaguely make out the shape of a tree. I can tell it's a tree. I can tell how big it is, but I might not be able to tell what kind it is. I can't see the branches. I certainly can't see any of the leaves because that mist is in the way. But as the morning unfolds and the sun comes out and it warms up and that mist evaporates away, all of a sudden the tree comes into more and more clarity until I get to the point that I can see each individual leaf, and I might even see a squirrel in the tree or a place that leaves are dying because it's fall or whatever it looks like. But because that mist is gone, I have more specifics to understand exactly what the tree looks like. And so when we tap on the emotion about the issue, like I said before, we feel better. But the other is all of a sudden we have so much more clarity about the issue, which makes the tapping on the most specific understanding we have easier because all of a sudden we have a lot more specifics. And as a side effect, I have even been in a circumstance where we've tacked on the emotion about the issue. And because that emotion is connected to the issue itself, sometimes we knock out the entire issue by just tapping on our emotion about the fact that we're experiencing this. As a review, it's really easy for us to get hung up trying to be as specific as possible and make the mistake of thinking being as specific as possible means that we are 100% specific, because that's not the case. Number two, the easiest thing for us to tap on is the leading edge of whatever the issue is. And the often question to ask is, how do I feel about the fact I'm experiencing this? And tapping on this. Third, by doing that, it is going to give you greater access and insight to your core issue so you can clear it faster. And in some cases, just tapping on the emotion about the issue is enough to take care of the issue. So this becomes a really straightforward approach. So whenever you tap, after you explain what is going on and how you feel, just ask yourself the question, how do I feel about the fact I am experiencing this? And tuning in that is going to give you space to be able to be more successful with your tapping. If you haven't done so, I want you to also go back and listen to the episode from earlier this week, episode 387. Go to tappingpodcast.com, click on the link for 387. If you're in the website, if you click on podcast up in the menu bar, it'll take you there and you'll just see it there in the list. What that will do is that gives you 3 things to keep in mind to tap for before you start the session. So it's almost as if you look at the 3 things we talked about on Monday, then you ask yourself, how do I feel about the issue, and tap on that. And if you do those things at the beginning of a tapping session, you're going to find your tapping to be so much more successful if you're tapping on your own or if you're working with someone else. And 2, because you are so much more successful with tapping, you're much more likely to reach for the tool set of tapping. So you get more out of tapping and you encourage yourself to tap more, which means you get more out of tapping. And so you can just see that rippling effect through your life of how adding these small things at the beginning of tapping is going to supercharge the experience, but also make you a more effective, consistent tapper. If you know someone in your life who is tapping and sometimes struggle with tapping, and I would say that is everyone who taps, because we all sometimes struggle, I would encourage you to pass this along to them. Again, don't spam your inbox and send it to everybody in the world. If there is someone you know who might find this useful, please pass the word along. The most common way people find audio in this crazy world is from a recommendation from a friend. For example, if you go into iTunes Podcasts right now, there are 750,000 podcasts. And if you're new to podcasting and finding your way to something like this might be hard, so you could be the person that makes it easy for them to tap. And if you make it easier for them, they're going to tap more. They're going to be healthier. We're all going to be in a healthier place. If you haven't done so already, I've recently joined the ranks of Instagram for the Tapping Q&A podcast. So the Instagram handle is Tapping Q&A, TAPPINGQANDA. The word "and" is spelled out. In addition to sharing links to lots of useful resources, I put custom tapping scripts on there, information. It's an awesome place in this amazing digital world that we can interact. Please come join me over there. If you have a question or a comment, something you'd like to see us cover in a future show, please let me know. Some of the best topics we've done this summer came from recommendations from listeners just like you. I can be reached, Gene, Gene, at tappingqa.com. If you're in the website, click on that contact link. If you're in the Tapping Q&A app, just click on contact. You can send me an email or a voice message from right inside of the app. And if you haven't downloaded the app, do so. In addition to having access to the entire audio archive, there's bonus audio that only appears in the app. And whenever we tap in a session, I include a printed version of the tapping script as a separate entry in the app. So you can access those whenever you are, wherever you are. Just pull it up, click on the little link, and you can tap right along with it. If you haven't done so, you can also subscribe to the podcast. In podcast parlance, subscribe means free. Yes, there are audio out there where they charge. This is not one of those. So you can go into Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Pandora, Spotify, Deezer, radio.com. You can even find the podcast on your Alexa home device. I don't want to say the word so it doesn't fire off while you're listening to this at home, but it's super easy to have access to the entire archive. Again, over 400 episodes, even though this is episode 393, even though this is episode 388 with bonus podcasts, there's over 400 episodes there waiting for you absolutely free of charge. For the Tapping Q&A podcast, this is Gene Montrestelli. I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you real soon. Bye-bye. The Tapping Q&A podcast is copyright Gene Montrestelli, Tapping Q&A 2016. All views expressed by guests are those of the guests and not necessarily of Gene Montrestelli or Tapping Q&A.